Hi everyone, we are starting a series on deep dives in every single factory set of the Pokemon trading card game, from the first set to the very last set. Because this is the first episode of this series, we are starting, of course, with the base set. So, the Pokemon trading card game has two structures. We have the English structure on the one hand and the Japanese structure on the other hand. Each structure has single cards and sealed product. The goal of this video is to focus on the English structure and specifically the singles. So we want to give a detailed overview of all different cards and the different variations of the base set. Therefore, it is not our goal to discuss the sealed products of the English trading card game and not discuss the Japanese structure. The base set was released in English on the 9th of January 1999. Since then, Pokemon has been a part of our lives. The custom made databases of Collexy, a new platform through which you can collect, track, buy, sell, and value your collectibles, mapped all the different variants of the cards of the base set. This allowed me to make a video on the different variants within the base set. As eager as I might be to jump into the base set, it is of great importance that we first discuss the database terminology in order to avoid any confusion down the road. It is important to understand the database of Collexy for the Pokemon trading card game. Every variant is linked to three different parameters to give the variant its correct place in the database of the Pokemon trading card game. Firstly, we have the era. The era refers to the time period during which the factory set was released. Secondly, there is a factory set. The factory set refers to the collection of cards that are being brought under one denominator, a set name. Thirdly, every card in the factory set has one so called master, and that master encompasses all different variants of that specific card. Finally, every version falls under a specific master, and thus is called a variant of that master. It is essential to understand that for every card there is only one single master, while there could be, and usually are, multiple variants per master. For example, we take a look at Alakazam, the first card that was printed in the base set with the number 1 out of 102. The base set is a part of the Wizards of the Coast era and has a total of 102 cards. Therefore, there are 102 masters. The Alakazam is the first master of the base set. Now, the Alakazam has multiple variants of the master Alakazam. In total, there are 22 variants. The variant that we have selected here is the variant that is English, shadowless, of the Unlimited Edition with the copyright of 1999. As we have now walked through the database structure of the Pokemon trading card game that is used by Collexy, we will now take a look at the structure of the base set itself and start our deep dive of the first set of the Pokemon trading card game. So the base set consists of 102 different cards. For the purposes of the database of Collexy, these are 102 masters, of which there are 69 Pokemon, 26 trainer cards, and 7 energy cards. The rarities, the base set rarities are pretty straightforward. There are 16 holo rares, which means that those are rare cards with a holofoil pattern, which means it's a shiny card. 16 rare cards, 31 uncommon cards, and 39 common cards. The base set was printed, and again, we are looking only at the English structure for this video, in the following languages, which is English, Dutch, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, and Chinese. Now we will discuss the card structure of the cards that are included in the base set. There are three different structures. We have the Pokemon card, the Trainer card, and the Energy card. We will first start with the Pokemon card and then illustrate the differences of the Trainer card and the Energy card compared to the Pokemon card, because there are a lot of similarities between the cards. So now we will discuss the Pokemon cards. We will walk through the different elements that can be found on the Pokemon card and discuss them briefly. So the first element of the Pokemon card, and probably the most important element, is the art box, in which the Pokemon is featured with, in this event, a holofoil pattern, as this is a holofoil card. The holofoil has two variants. So we have the Starlight holofoil, which you can see on the left, and we have the Cosmos holofoil on the right. We will discuss the holofoil patterns in more detail later on in the video. So on the top left of the Pokemon card, you can see the Pokemon from which the featured Pokemon, in this event the Alakazam, will evolve. The Pokemon from which Alakazam will evolve is Kadabra. You can see on the left side the visual representation of Kadabra, and on the top you can also see the name of Kadabra. Also on the top, you can find the name of the Pokemon, in this event Alakazam. This name can differ based on the language that the Pokemon card was printed in. And on the right hand side, on top of the card, you can find the HP, which is the health points of the Pokemon. In this event, Alakazam has 80 health points, and the type of the Pokemon. In this event, Alakazam is a psychic type, so you see the psychic symbol next to the HP. So we have now talked about the R box and all the elements above the R box. On the left hand side, under the R box, you can now see an empty space. Either that space is empty or there is a first edition sign. This is also a very important element of the Pokemon card and will also affect the desirability and rarity of the Pokemon card. So now on the other side of the card, on the same level, you can see also an empty space because normally there would be a symbol set in that space. However, as base set does not have a symbol set, this space is currently empty. So in the area below the art box, you can find the different elements that are important for the playability and a little bit of lore of the specific Pokemon. So you can find the Pokemon power, the Pokemon abilities, the weakness, resistance, retreat cost, and the description of that specific Pokemon. The languages also differ based on the fact that the cards are printed in a total of 9 different languages, which is a little bit similar to the different names that could be on top of the Pokemon cards. So on the bottom of the card, you can find more information about the card itself. The first element that is being shown is the illustrator of the card. The second element is the Nintendo copyright years. And the third element is the Wizard of the Coast copyright year or years. Finally, the last elements that we will discuss can be found in the bottom of the Pokemon card, bottom right to be exact. You can find the number of the master, which is for Alakazam 1 out of 102, and the rarity of the master, which in this case is a star, which means it's a rare, and because it's a holofoil card, it's a holofoil rare. So let's take a brief look at the trainer card. The layout of the trainer card is very similar to the Pokemon card that we just discussed. However, the edition symbol does not appear on the left hand side right under the art box of a trainer card, but appears on the bottom left side for a trainer card. Just like a trainer card, an energy card does not differ that much from a Pokemon card. However, here the first edition stamp or the edition element is to be found on the top right of the card, contrary to on the right under the R box or in the bottom left of the card. So we have talked about the concept of a master and a variation. As we know, there are 102 masters in the base set, as there are 102 cards. However, now we will discuss the different kinds of variations and parameters that need to be taken into account to differentiate between each variation under a master. Generally speaking, there are exceptions. There are about 22 variations of each master, which means each card in the base set. So let's dive deeper into the different variations. So the first parameter of the different variations that we will discuss is languages. As I mentioned before, the base set was printed in 9 different languages. So we have English, we have Spanish, we have German, French, and Portuguese, and we have Dutch, Italian, and Chinese. We have separated these in 4 different categories. As for English, we have, generally speaking, 4 variations. For Spanish, we have 4 variations as well, while for German, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese, we have 2 variations each. So we have already discussed edition, but as a second parameter that is being used for the different variations, we shortly reiterate the difference between a first edition and unlimited edition. Right below the R box on the left side, you can see either a first edition, like you can see on the left on the video, and an unlimited edition, which means there is no first edition stamp on the right side. This differentiates between both kinds of variations with respect to the edition. The third element that we will be taking a look at as a parameter to determine the different variations is whether or not a variant is shadowless or shadowed. This is a variation that is only applicable for the English versions or variants of the cards included in the base set, not in any other language and not in any other factory set. We will take a closer look at the shadowless version and at the shadowed version to see how we can differentiate between both variants. So let's now first take a look at the shadowless variant and how we can determine whether a variant is shadowless or shadowed. So there are two main elements and two side elements. The main elements are by far the most important elements to take a look at to determine whether a card or whether a variant is shadowless. So the first element is to take a look at the R box and whether to determine whether or not you see on the right hand side and on the bottom of the R box a shadow. If there is no shadow, it's very likely to be a shadowless variant. However, there is a second test or main element that needs to be considered, and that is the Nintendo copyright. If the Nintendo copyright on the bottom left of the card says copyright symbol 1995, 96, 98, and 99, then it is very likely that it is a shadowless card. There are two side elements that need to be considered but are not essential, and that is that the HP text on top of the card next to with the Alakazam the 80 above the art box, that it is plain, so not in bold. And the last little side element is that the color is a lot lighter than the shadowed versions. So let's now take a look at the shadowed variant of the card, of the master. So we have the same main elements and side elements that we need to consider. However, now we can see that on the right hand side and on the bottom of the art box, there is a clear shadow next to the art box. And on the bottom left, for the Nintendo copyright, it says copyright symbol 1995, 96, 98, and the year 99 is gone. If these two elements are met, then we are talking about a shadowed variant and not a shadowless variant. In addition, the two side elements, you can see that the HP is in bold, while the shadowless version was in plain text, and the color is a lot darker than the one of the shadowless variant. So the fourth parameter that is being considered for determining the correct variant is the holofoil pattern. We have already briefly discussed the holofoil pattern when we were discussing the layout and structure of a Pokemon card. However, it is important to reiterate this as there is a difference in holofoil patterns depending on the language in which the variant was printed. So on the left-hand side, you have the Starlight holofoil, which is basically a stars pattern in the holofoil pattern. These cards were distributed in English, Spanish, German, French, and Portuguese. There is one English variant and only one of one master, which is the Machamp card, that is printed in the Cosmos holofoil. We will come back to that later in the video. Secondly, it is important to note that for the Spanish cards, there's only a Starlight holofoil for the print with copyright of Wizards of the Coast of 1999, which is the Latin American print. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, we have the Cosmos holofoil pattern, which is a pattern of circles and which was printed in the languages Dutch, Spanish, Italian, Korean, and Chinese. These patterns were, for the Spanish language, only included in the cards that had a copyright date from 1999 to 2000, which is the Spanish print. These holofoil patterns are obviously only important for the 16 holo rares that are included in the base set. This does not apply to all the other cards, as these are deemed non-holofoil. Last but not least, we have the copyright parameter to determine the correct variant. It is important to note that the English, Spanish, German, French, and Portuguese variants have been printed in only the copyright 1999. However, please note that for the English variant, there is one special print, which is called the fourth print. We will come back to that a little bit later in the video, which is with the copyright 1999 to 2000, and it's an unlimited print run. While for the Spanish variants, you have the copyright 1999, which is only applicable for the print that was done in Latin America, or for the cards that were distributed in Latin America. In addition, for the copyright 1999 to 2000, they were printed in English, as we mentioned for the final print run of the base set. Spanish for the cards that were distributed in Spain, in Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese. The base set was, due to the large demand, printed in 8 different print runs. However, these 8 different print runs did not amount into 8 different variations, but only 4 different variations. As there are only 4 different variations, we deem these 4 different variations to be the 4 different print runs of the base set. So for the first print run, all the variants were first edition. So for the English versions and variants that were printed, they were all shadowless and all had the Wizards of the Coast copyright date of 1999. For the Spanish variants, there were no shadowless cards, only shadowed cards, but they came in 2 different variants. The Wizards of the Coast copyright year 1999, which was distributed in Latin America, and the Wizards of the Coast copyright 1999 to 2000, which was distributed in Spain. For the German, French, and Portuguese cards, the first edition variant only came in the shadowed version with the copyright of Wizards of the Coast of copyright 1999. There was no Wizards of the Coast copyright year 1999 to 2000. The exact opposite was the case for the Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese cards. There were no shadowless cards, there were only shadowed, but there was no Wizards of the Coast copyright year 1999. Only the copyright years 1999 to 2000 were used for these last languages. The second print run is very straightforward. This is only for unlimited shadowless variants. As only English cards were printed in the shadowless variant format, there were no Spanish, German, French, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, Korean, or Chinese cards in the shadowless variant, as these were always shadowed. So the third print run was an only unlimited edition print run where the cards in the art box would always be shadowed. For English, there was only a shadowed unlimited edition print run. There was a third print run in with copyright of Wizards of the Coast of 1999. The fourth print run, which we will go further on later in the video, they also have a copyright of Wizards of 1999 to 2000, but this one did not form part of the third print run. For the Spanish versions, there were both 1999 and 1999 2000 variants. For German, French, and Portuguese, there was only the unlimited shadowed editions with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999, while for Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese, you have the right opposite, where there were only versions with the Wizards of the Coast copyright 1999 to 2000 variants. So only for Spanish, it exists in both, for English as well, but for English, only 1999 in the third print run and 1999 to 2000 in the fourth print run. So the final print run is a fourth print run. In the fourth print run, only unlimited edition shadowed variants were printed with the Wizards of the Coast copyright years 1999 to 2000. So only English variants were printed. Even though the Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese cards also have the Wizards of the Coast copyright years 1999 to 2000, these are considered the second print run or to be deemed under the third general print run of the different variants of the base set cards. So by way of conclusion, we will take a look at a summarizing overview of all the different print runs, and we will take a look at a form of decision tree to make it easier to determine which variant you have in your possession. So here we have a summary overview of all the different variants of the car of the masters and the cars in the base sets in with respect to the different languages in which they were printed. So the first edition Shadowless was only printed in English, not in any other language. The other languages did have first edition cards. The first edition shadowed variants with the copyright of Wizards of the Coast from 1999 were printed in Spanish, in German, in French, and in Portuguese. The Spanish variants were only printed for the Latin America region. The first edition shadowed versions with the Wizards of the Coast copyright years 1999 to 2000 were printed in Spanish, Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese, whereby the Spanish variants were printed for Spain. The unlimited shadowless variants were only printed in English, just like the first edition shadowless variants, as shadowless variants were only printed in English, so not in any other language. The unlimited shadowed copyright of the Wizards of the Coast of 1999 were printed in English, Spanish for the Latin America region, and German, French, and Portuguese. The unlimited editions or the unlimited versions with Shadow with the copyright of Wizards of the Coast from 1999 to 2000 were printed in English, which was the base set or the base 1999 to 2000, the fourth print run, Spanish, only for Spain, and were printed in Dutch, Italian, Korean, and Chinese. So we have basically condensed all the information that we obtained through the database of Collexy into a decision tree. Thereby the first question is which language the card was printed in. If the language is English, we always have to ask ourselves the question which edition the card is in, whether or not the card is deemed to be shadowless or shadowed, and depending on that answer, from which copyright year of Wizards of the Coast the variant is. If the card is not English but Spanish, there are four different variants, two first editions and two unlimited, whereby there is a Latin distribution or a Latin America distribution with the copyright of Wizards of the Coast of 1999 and a distribution in Spain with the copyright 1999 to 2000. In other languages, there are only two variants, one is first edition and one is unlimited. So up until now, we have discussed the database structure of Collexy that we have used throughout the video so far to determine the different variations that are part of a master. We have discussed the difference between a master, of which there is only one per card in the base set, which means there are 102 masters, and that there are multiple variations of each master. Even though the most of the variants are the same per master, there are multiple variations per master that are unique to that specific master. We have lined all of these variations up per master to discuss the different variations and the slight differences that are there between the different variants. We will now discuss these in the next part of the video. So the first master that we will discuss that has multiple additional variations on top of the standard variations that we have discussed is Machamp. Machamp is a special card as it only appears in first edition with the exception of one single variation. We will discuss these in the next couple of minutes of this video. So this shows that there are 7 different variations of Machamp. We will now go into depth on each variation to show the difference and to show how each variation is unique. So the first variation that we will discuss is the first print run of Machamp. It is a shadowless card with the first edition. It has a Starlight Holofoil and it has the Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. The Machamp card is not available in the base set, in the booster packs, or in the booster boxes, but it is part of the two-player set in general. This card is also part of the two-player starter set. Just like the first print run is also this variant of Machamp part of the two-player starter set, the only difference here is that this is a shadowed version or variant and this is not a shadowless variant due to the presence of a shadow on the right-hand side and on the bottom of the art box and the absence of the 99 in the Nintendo copyright year. The third extra variant of Machamp is identical to the two previous ones, and the only difference with the last one is that this is a Cosmos Holofoil variant. It is the only base set variant that is in English that has a Cosmos Holofoil treatment, as normally all English variants have a Starlight Holofoil. This version could exclusively be received in the two-player CD-ROM starter set. Machamp, as we mentioned earlier, was only available in a first edition format. However, there is one unlimited Machamp available, which was distributed in the Trainer Deck A. This was the only unlimited edition Machamp, was distributed in Shadowed Subrarity and without a holofoil. So it has neither a Starlight holofoil treatment nor a Cosmos holofoil treatment. There is another way, aside of the lack of any holofoil and the lack of the first edition stamp, to distinguish this variation from other variations, which is the red border and the red text which says Trainer Deck A on the back of the card. This variation is also a slight variation compared to the rest of them. This is also a first edition English card with Starlight holofoil, but this is part of the fourth print run. So this comes in two-player starter sets that were printed during the fourth print run. You can see this through the Wizards of the Coast copyright years of 1999 to 2000. Machamp was also printed, of course, in other languages, being German, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. These versions, albeit they are in a different language, have the same parameters. They are first edition, are shadowed, have a Starlight holofoil, and have the copyright of Wizards of the Coast of 1999. These could be found in the two-player starter set of course, the language that they were printed in. Last but not least, the final variation of Machamp. This one was printed in Dutch, Spanish, Italian, Korean, and in Chinese. These were printed in a Cosmos holofoil finish instead of the Starlight holofoil. And for the rest, they are very similar to the previous version, where they are printed in first edition, Shadowed Suprarity, but they do have the Wizards of the Coast copyright years of 1999 to 2000, and these could also be found in the two-player starter set of the languages in which they were printed. Now we will take a look at the trainer decks. So we have the normal decks, which we will not go into deeper here, but the trainer decks were two decks that were distributed to different Pokemon shops that were called Trainer Deck A, which was Brock's deck, and Trainer Deck B, which was Misty's deck. So we will go now more in depth on the variations that came from these decks. The trainer decks, so Trainer Deck A and Trainer Deck B, were distributed to Pokemon shops that were holding Pokemon League tournaments. These were intended to be given to gym leaders, which are people that would assist the players in playing the Pokemon game. They were not intended for distribution. They were printed during the same time as the base set, however, they were considered so called prototype product. So they were not, and it's clearly stated on the decks themselves, they were not intended for resale. To revert back to the variants, all the variants that are included in these decks are very similar or are identical to the unlimited variants that are shadowed with the Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. The only difference is that on the back of these cards, the border of the cards are a very clear red color, and on the writing of the back, we can see respectively for Trainer Deck A and Trainer Deck B, the writing Trainer Deck A in red or Trainer Deck B in red. There is a discussion on the rarity of these trainer decks. However, we can basically conclude that the trainer deck B is more rare than trainer deck A. There is a lot of speculation on why that would be, but looking at the current sentiment of the market and looking at what I found on other sources, is that trainer deck B is actually more rare than trainer deck A and more valuable. So Trainer Deck A, which is also called Brock's deck, was a trainer deck that included several cards. all of these cards have the famous red border and red writing Trainer Deck A on the back of the card. That's the only way to distinguish them from other variants that were printed during the third print run, which were the unlimited copyright 1999 of Wizards of the Coast versions. So the only rare card in Trainer Deck A is the Machamp card, and as we mentioned earlier under the Machamp variants, this is the only time the Machamp card was printed not only in the Unlimited edition, but also in a non-holo variant. Aside of the fact that it's an Unlimited edition and a non-holofoil variant, we can also distinguish this version through the red border on the back and the red lettering of Trainer Deck A on the back as well. The same concept applies to Trainer Deck B, which is referred to as Misty's deck. Here we also have a special variant of all the different cards that we see here. They also have a red border on the back and the red writing on the middle of the card, of the back of the card, Trainer Deck B. What is important here is the special variation of Blastoise, which also comes here in an unlimited variation, which is not different than other cards, because there are other unlimited variations of the Blastoise base card, but this one also has no holofoil, so no Starlight holofoil, no Cosmos holofoil, contrary to all the other variations in the base set. What is interesting here in the deck B is that there is not one single rare card in the deck, but there are in total 4 rare cards. Three out of those 4 rare cards, they do not differentiate themselves too much in the front from other unlimited editions with the Wizards of the Coast copyright year 1999. Only on the back you will see that they have a red border with the Trainer Deck B in red on the back of the card. The only version that is very different, or variant that is very different from the standard variants in the base set, is Blastoise, like we just mentioned. So now we will discuss some more variants. These variants differ based on printing errors, design mistakes, different stamps, or different events that the cards were distributed at that had an impact on how the card looks. So there are 2 additional variants for Blastoise, aside of the extra variant that we just discussed that was included in Trainer Deck B. This is a Blastoise that we call the stage error variant. On the top right of the card, we see put Blastoise on the card. In between those words, there should have been stage. Due to a printing error, the word stage was not included. For the rest, this card completely matches the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowed Subrarity and Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999. This is another variant of Blastoise and the last extra variant that will be of relevance here in this video, which is also exactly the same like an English Unlimited Edition with the Shadowed Subrarity and the copyright year of Wizards of the Coast of 1999. However, here, next to the attack Hydro Pump of Blastoise, you can see on top of the energies that are needed to execute this attack, there is a red dot. This is a printing error that is probably the result of a printing defect. This is the first Ninetales variant in addition to the already existing Ninetales variants that we have discussed. There is a second one that we will discuss in a little bit. This Ninetales variant is called the No Damage Ninetales. Next to the second attack Fire Blast, there should be a number, 80, because that's the damage that the attack should normally do. However, in the unlimited shadowless print with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999, the amount of the damage, which is 80, was for some reason due to a design error not included on the shadowless variants or on some of the shadowless variants, which makes this a separate variant that is very similar to the English Unlimited Edition Shadowless with Wizards of the Coast copyright 1999. This is a second variation of Ninetales. This is called the Black Flame Ninetales. This is a lot more difficult to spot than other errors like we saw with Blastoise and with Machamp, etc. This is very similar to the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowed Subrarity with the Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. What the difference here is that the flames on next to Ninetales, as we can see on the card, are a lot more darker. And by darker, I mean that it's very difficult to see the holofoil in those flames. CGC has recently added this as a recognized error, which means that if you have a good eye, you can take out the black flame ninetails, which should be in essence a lot more rare than the regular ninetails, which has blue flames and through which the holofoil clearly comes forward. Raichu has also an additional variation. The variation here is actually very similar to the English Unlimited Shadowed Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999, but only has one element that is added to it, which is a pre-release stamp in the bottom right corner of the art box of Raichu. This is an unofficial release with the pre-release stamp. These were printed by accident as they ended up on the printer where the clefables of the jungle set were being printed with a pre-release stamp. The first official pre-release card was a clefable from the jungle set and was also distributed at Pokémon Leagues in 1999. However, Raichu was not an official pre-release card. Due to some kind of error, Raichu sheets ended up on the printer. These were then destroyed by Wizards of the Coast. However, some of these variants ended up in the hands of Wizards of the Coast employees. Hence, this is an unofficial release, but they are still a release and they are still part of the base set variants of the MasterCard Raichu. There is also an extra variant of Beedrill. This is very similar to the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowed Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. In the second attack called Poison Sting, there is a word defending, and between the D and the rest of the word, there is a dot inserted. This is simply a printing error, but is still a different variant compared to the other variants of the Master Beedrill. Diglett has also an extra variation, and just like Beedrill, it is the result of a printing error. In the first attack, Dig, the energy symbol has been flipped 90 degrees. This is simply a printing error, but it's also a different variant than the variants we have already mentioned of Diglett. War Turtle also has a different variation in addition to the existing variations of the Master of War Turtle. This is called the evolution box error and is more the result of a design flaw than a printing error. The entire card is very similar to the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowed Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999. However, here the evolution box on the left hand side above the R box shows War Turtle, and it seems to indicate that War Turtle evolves from War Turtle, even though the text above it says that it evolves from Squirtle. This is simply a design flaw and is not really a printing error, but is an additional variation of War Turtle. The last one is Pikachu, and Pikachu has a lot of different variants in addition to the already existing variations. So the first one is very similar to the English first edition with Shadowless Subrarity with the Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999, and you can see on the card that it has the red cheeks print and is a first edition print. This is the first variation. The second variation is very similar to the first variation. However, here the Pikachu has a yellow cheeks print. So it's a second additional variation for Pikachu. This variation is very similar to the previous one, which is identical almost because it's also based on the English first edition with Shadowless Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999. But in here it should have had a first edition stamp. However, due to a printing error, probably empty ink, there is a ghost stamp instead of a first edition stamp. This is a separate variation and is the third additional variation for Pikachu. This is the fourth variation of Pikachu, which is very similar to the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowless Superiority with Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. This variant has a red cheeks print, but is not first edition and is only the Unlimited Edition variant. This fifth variant is very similar to the previous variant, however, here the print is not the red cheeks but the yellow cheeks print. For the rest, it's very similar to the English Unlimited Edition with Shadowless Superiority with Wizards of the Coast copyright year of 1999. The sixth variant is also a Pikachu, based on the English Unlimited edition with Shadowless Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999, with the red cheeks print that is not first edition but that has the E3 stamp. This card was distributed at the E3 convention held in May 1999 in Los Angeles in the United States. This seventh variant is very similar to the previous one, however, it also differs. This is more like an English Unlimited edition with shadowed Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999. So this is not shadowless like the previous one, and it also does not have red cheeks, but it does have yellow cheeks. In addition, this card was distributed in the Nintendo Power magazine in September 1999, so this card was not distributed in the E3 convention. This is the final variant of Pikachu. It is very similar to the English Unlimited edition with Shadowed Subrarity with Wizards of the Coast copyright of 1999. This variant has a PokeTour 1999 stamp in the top right corner of the art box. It also has the yellow cheeks. We will now take a quick look at Collexy and how their custom-made databases allowed me to map all the different masters and variants of those masters for the base set. Collexy is a new platform to collect, track, buy, sell, and value your collectible powered by custom-made databases. The custom-made database of Collexy map all different variants of a card, the so-called master, differentiating between all variants as every variant is different and distinguishable. You can collect your cards on Collexy through the Collection Maker tool that facilitates your specific collection needs. You can start collecting and tracking your collection now on www.collexy.com. Through Collexy, I learned that there are 446 English variants of the base set. However, if I were to solely collect the unlimited English variants of the base set, the total amount of variants would be reduced to 134 variants. I hope you found this video educational and fun to watch. Please like, subscribe, and share. Please also follow our Instagram for more solid Pokemon content. Signing out, Collexy, where collectibles connect.